From Wall Street to Main Street to help small business owners have the same capital as corporate America and give them the same resources as a larger company. We cover business funding, business credit, scaling, business consulting, and much more. Check out the website at shieldadvisorygroup.com. Welcome to the show, The Liquid Lunch Project.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Liquid Lunch Project. I am Matthew R. Meehan, alongside my partner, the professor, Luigi Rosa Bianca. What's on tap today, Lou?
Matt, I've recently come to the realization that you, me, and the rest of the planet spend a great deal of our day eating, sleeping, and selling. We're always selling. We're selling ourselves. We're selling our products. I mean, you probably sold yourself to your wife. Not really, but figuratively speaking. And we're doing it constantly. And the sadness is we're doing it all wrong. So today on the podcast, we've got Bill Caskey. And Bill Caskey has this revolutionary way of selling. So Bill, welcome to the podcast. And please enlighten us and the audience. What are we doing wrong and how can we do it right?
Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me in. I appreciate a liquid lunch. I always like to have a liquid lunch sometime during the week. And today it's perfect. So you caught me at a good time. But I'm not too far into the bottle yet, so this is a perfect episode.
Man after our own heart.
When you hear my story, you'll know why. I got out of school in 40 years ago, 30 years ago, and I didn't know what I wanted to do. And when you don't know what you want to do in life, you kind of go on a drift. And I was adrift in my 20s. And I was partying a little bit too much, not sleeping enough. Personal affairs were kind of a mess. And I was in sales and I wasn't very good at it. I was mediocre at best, always near the bottom of the stack rank. Remember when they used to stack rank salespeople? I don't know if you ever were in a company like that.
Yeah.
It's a shame, it's a shaming process. You walk through by like, oh, I'm number 10 out of 10. That's not good. So I had this come to Jesus meeting late one night inside of my bed. Nobody else was in the room. Jesus might've been there, but nobody else was there. And I said to myself, you better figure this out because this is not a good path for you. And so I went on kind of a learning jag then, and I started to study the art of sales and communications more than sales, just psychology and philosophy. And like, why is it that some people are really good at this profession and most other people are just average to mediocre, which included me? And so I found out a lot of things. We can talk about some of those things, but that's kind of how it all began. It began from my own personal pain of not being very good at something that I knew I needed to be good at.
Well, you had to provide for the family and you had to pay the bills. So how did you learn to become good at sales?
Well, I studied a lot of text, and that was back in the days. You guys too young. I don't know. Maybe Luigi, you're old enough to remember cassette tapes.
Now, why would you go with the assumption that I'm older than dear Matthew?
I don't know. The hat, maybe? I don't know. So I don't know that. But, there was these little things called cassette tapes. You popped them in the car, and you probably remember those things. And so I was just trying to consume everything. And here's what I realized. Everything was the same. It all was a version of what do I need to say or do to get somebody to buy? Okay. That was really the essence of most of the sales training. And it's that way today too. And I thought, that doesn't seem right because wait a minute, our prospect or our customer, they're the ones with the problem, the pain, the issue. Why are we working so damn hard trying to convince them to buy from us? They should be convincing us that they have a problem we're solving. So I thought it was all backwards. I just thought it was all backwards. And so that's the time when I started to put together a framework that really changed the dynamic of the buyer-seller process. I'd call it a 180 flip. You just have to flip the script and change the dynamic. And what that does when you change it effectively is the prospect is more engaged. They're interested in getting their problem solved. They're telling you what their issues are. They're honest with you about their issues. They're not hiding things. And so it just felt like a much more organic, joyful way to sell. And it's been successful for hundreds of companies and me included. And so that's kind of I arrived at that conclusion that we need to do an upheaval on the sales process.
Bill, do you find that these parameters apply to brick and mortar sales and white collar type services and door to door? I mean, are these rules that we can apply to all sales?
I think so. I mean, my work is primarily in the business to business arena, but we're talking about human nature here. We're talking about psychology, and we're talking about how people decide to let you into their life and how they decide to share information with you. And if you can't get past that because you look like an amateur and people are running from you, if people aren't running toward you and instead they're running from you, you know you're not doing it right. And so does it work door to door? I don't work with door to door companies, but sure, of course, the same thing would work. It's a little different. The words change, but if you have audience that's business, high-end business to consumer, boats, homes, high-end cars, or business to business, has some magical effects.
So people tend to do business with ones that they know, like, and trust, right? You've heard that adage before. Help the audience understand how to apply that know, like, and trust, right? Because these acronyms and taglines are real easy to understand, but they're very difficult to implement, right? So in today's world, are you knowing someone because you're constantly sending them feeds via the socials and newsletters and podcasts and sound familiar, partner? Like, how do you really, really create that robust message?
Well, I just wrote down the exact word that you just finished the sentence with. Message is, I think, the message, your message of value has to be unique. It has to be clear. And I think there's a lot of people who get told, you need to shoot more videos for LinkedIn. You need to do a podcast. You need to do. And we never stop and say, well, what am I communicating here? What's the real message? And how many times have you seen somebody you'd like to listen to, and you listen for 30 seconds, like, oh God, I can't do it. I mean, I don't know what they're talking about. That's sometimes a thing I hear. So I think how you construct and craft your message, and that has to be constructed through the eyes of the customer, not through your own eyes. So, for example, I don't know if you want to go into an example here or whether you want to.
Please, I think that's the best way to learn by case studies and examples.
Yeah. So typically, here's the message. If I ask a salesperson who maybe comes into one of my programs first week, I say, hey, you need to shoot some videos. Here's the video he'll come back with. Hey, Bill Caskey here with Caskey Training. We do a lot of work in the logistics business. We're really good at A, B, and C. We've got an awesome website, and we'd love it if you could reach out and schedule a appointment with one of our people. And that's the video they shoot. And it's awful, but that's the only way they know how to do it, is to talk about themselves. My recommendation is flip that script again. Talk about the customer's problems and their frustrations before you talk about the call to action to book an appointment. Nobody's going to book an appointment based on that video. So if you approach it and say, hi, Bill Caskey here with Caskey Training. I work with VPs of sales, and here's some of the issues that I see VPs of sales have today. They're trying to figure out a better way to X. They're trying to solve the problem of Y, and they're always looking for ways to, you've got a sales team that's doing pretty well, but they could do better. If you want to hear more about that, I've shot a video, click the link below. That message speaks to them. It speaks to that human being who's in the audience. And then they can go, if they choose, if they have those problems. If they don't, they're not going to do anything. But if they have those problems, they say, yeah, I'd like to hear more. Then they go to the next step. So that's an example of how messaging needs to be crafted. It's got to be them focused, not you focused. And we all know that. We all know that, don't we? I mean, don't you two guys, you guys know that? But there's a difference between knowing and doing.
You speak to the audience, right?
Speak to the audience about what's on their mind. Get inside their mind. If you don't know what's on the mind of your audience, you're not doing something right. You need to understand what they're struggling with, what they're hoping for.
Now, Bill, this is something that comes up with us and our clients almost on a daily basis. That message, that important message that we're trying to convey. In today's market, there are so many messages and there are so many vehicles to send that message. How does a business or a salesperson choose whether it's print, video, both, newsletter, podcast? Like you could really get lost in the weeds if you did everything.
That's right. Unfortunately, if you pick one that's not the right one and you work on it for 5 years, you may have missed $100 million of business because you didn't test. So the first thing I would say, it's a great question, Luigi. I mean, where do you start with this? If you're not doing anything now, you're not going to go from no platforms to 5. You just won't. So don't kid yourself, but pick one. I always feel like for business to business sales professionals, LinkedIn is probably the platform. It's probably the platform. So then say to yourself, look, I'm going to give this 90 days or 6 months. I'm going to give it time for the algorithm to catch up and for me to get put in front of the right people. I'm going to create 2 or 3 pieces of content a week. It could be video, it could be written, it could be graphics. Let the market tell you where it is. Here's an example. I do a lot of videos on LinkedIn. The videos that have a story in them get 5 to 10x the views versus the videos where I'm just lecturing and teaching something. People want stories. They want to know how Luigi went from 500 grand a year to $2 million. They want to know that, even if they don't believe it. And I'm never putting out things that aren't true, but even if it's like too good to be true, they still want to know what did Luigi learn that got him from where he was to where he wants to be. Stories are much better than lecture. And yet, how many times have you heard about story? You got to be a storyteller. You got to get in the story, but you got to learn how to tell stories. And most people don't know that.
Now, Bill, you mentioned that we craft the message to the audience, but if you're running a sales team or you're running a business, how can we craft the training to the sales professional? There's some people that are introverts, some people that are extroverts, some people that are articulate, there are others that are less articulate. How do you try to train a very large sales staff in trying to convey that single message?
Mm-hmm. You're not talking about on social media, you're talking about in general?
Well, whether it's a team of roof salesmen that are trying to sell roofs, or car salesmen that are trying to sell cars, or just a team. Like, there's a lot of small business owners that have sales team. And that one-to-one training is easy, but to scale a business, you have to 10x it. So how do you train en masse when the message is so curated?
Yeah, the way we went to this earlier this year, and it's kind of our business model, is I think great training today is a hybrid of digital and personal. I think if I just send out videos to my clients once a week and don't have any interaction with them, at some point they're going to get bored. They're not going to use it. But if there's a place once a month, which we have a once a month cohort where we come together and we talk about the lesson, we talk about issues, we talk about implementation, deployment. Now there's human beings around the table, the virtual table, talking about how they use this technique in their business or how they've changed their mindset. The future of education to me is in groups, is in small groups. It's not in digital. You can learn some technical skills in digital, but trying to get somebody to change their mindset about themselves and sales digitally, it's really hard to do. So
Bill, that is so salient, and I think it's so important. I'm just going to mention this anecdote just because it happened to Matt and I a couple of days ago. We're trying to build out our flow on our business in Shield Advisory Group to implement a lot of technology and a lot of high-powered technology to try to scale and streamline the process. And then the one thing we've realized is, as we're trying to implement the technology, at the end of the day, it's just a path, a high-tech path that leads to the sales call.
Yes, I agree.
With that being said, you see a lot of these tech companies that they have a lot of the successful ones have sales teams, but I mean, some of these companies have lost that human to human contact.
Absolutely.
That's extremely important, right? And I think there's a need out there and a desire to get that back again. Nobody wants to call Chase and talk to an AI assistant, right? So now they're trying to make AI assistants sound like normal people. But at the end of the day, there has to be some type of connection, right? You're not going to build a connection with an automated interface. It's really not going to happen, right? Yeah. And it may work for a while, but I don't think you're going to retain the relationship from that point moving forward.
Yeah, and I agree with you. How many times have you gotten ready to call Chase or whomever, and you get that feeling in your stomach, oh God, I'm going to have to go through the 7-part phone tree, and I'm not going to, I've got a vendor who sells to me, and whenever I call them, a person answers the phone. And I think I pay more for that at some point, but it's like, I don't mind calling them. We have a relationship now. You don't have a relationship with Chase. I've used Chase. I don't know one person at Chase.
100%. I think in an effort to optimize earnings per share, they lost human value to save a couple of dollars, but they also lost something even bigger. Yeah, maybe they had to pay a couple more dollars to have somebody on the phone and speak to them, answer the phone when they call. But on the company's point of view, they're losing missed opportunity there because they don't have the option to cross-sell, right? Just because somebody's saying that they have a problem with their debit card doesn't mean they're not looking for a mortgage, and you're not going to know that.
But I think, gentlemen, what we're saying is there is a happy medium because, frankly, if we go to some of these regional banks, and we're just using banking as an example, anecdotally, but if we go to a regional bank or maybe a small mom and pop bank, oh boy, it'll take an hour to send an ACH. So Chase's technology is streamlined and probably the premier in the space, but they lack in human interaction. Well, some of these may have that wonderful social relationship, and they probably know how many home runs your son hit last season, but they can't send an ACH, right? So that's the struggle of business and scaling, is to find that happy medium.
Yeah, and I think this discussion goes, I'm not, I've done a little bit of work with banks, but I always think of software, when you go to a website and everything's automated because it can be, and there's all AI chat bots because they can be, and you really are not going to talk to a person. I just think they've gone overboard there, all in the interest of efficiency and earnings per share, like you said, Matt. But I still feel like there's certain companies you need a human being, and especially if you're really trying to develop a relationship, which I know we throw that word around a lot, but you're not going to develop it with AI bots.
No, I agree. And I think the company misses cross-sell opportunities. I'm not going to refer you, hey, I need a mortgage. Well, I got a great AI chatbot you could talk to. It just doesn't work
just like a human. Sounds just like a human.
But guys, it can be done. It can be done. Like, and Matt and I try to implement this all day long. So I think there's a glass half full there. I mean, one of the industry standards is, pun intended, Salesforce. They have an immaculate IT platform, but they never forewent. Is the past tense of forewent? They never got rid of their sales team. They have a huge sales team, but their IT is unbridled.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
I would say I'll probably start using that this afternoon. Forewent. Yeah, I think it's good.
Tell us about the frameworks that you put together for salespeople to learn and overcome this.
Yeah. So the first thing I realized is that everybody's in sales, or everybody's an influencer of some kind, not social media influencer, but we influence our spouses, our wives, or both, our kids, our managers, and of course our customers. And so I just spoke to a group of 10 account management people, and they all claimed they weren't in sales, but guess what? They're all responsible for upselling the client to, like you said, add-on sales and other opportunities. So they're all in sales. So that's the first thing I learned, is we are all in it, and therefore we need to not be afraid of it. And if you need to change the name of it, if you need to call it something else so that the word sales is not in it, have at it. But we're all in it. I think that's the first thing. The second thing is, I believe the greatest salespeople are exquisite communicators rather than exquisite persuaders. There's a difference between persuasion and communication. When you go into an organization, let's say I'm selling to you guys, and I come in and I try to persuade you to buy from me, what do you do? What do you typically do when someone tries to pitch you something?
I get defensive.
Well, shut down.
Walls go up, motor shuts down. Then you say, oh, you know what? This has been great. Oh, God, I just realized I got to be at my granddaughter's school at 3:00 today. And you lie. And I don't mean you lie, but people lie. People lie to salespeople because you can still get to heaven lying to salespeople. And so if you are an amateur, that's how an amateur approaches it. If you're a pro, you need to have rigorously honest communication with a prospect. And the way you do that is to set the stage up front for that. So you might say something like, look, I'm glad you invited me in today. I don't know if I have anything at all in my tool chest here that could help you. I'm not sure, I want to know a little bit about you and what you do. So is it okay if we just have a discussion? Then at the end, we can decide, do we want to open the tool chest or not? Is that okay? So now I'm creating the runway. I'm creating the atmosphere. Very few salespeople do that. And it's the simplest thing. It takes 30 seconds. I just gave it to you. If you, rewind this, get it transcribed, use that on your next 10 sales calls. Watch what happens. It changes the entire dynamic. Remember, our focus is on change the dynamic from me selling them to them selling me. And that's the first step in it, is creating the atmosphere for truth to be exchanged.
Bill, what was one of the more difficult assignments you took on in implementing your sales methodology? We find that you tend to learn more during the struggles than the successes.
Yeah, I don't think there's any company that I haven't been able to help. I think the problem sometimes is the culture, and the people there are so closed off and they so bought into the not invented here scenario, where if it didn't come from this industry, it's not worth looking at. So that's probably the biggest challenge, is you have people who are closed-minded, closed off. But generally, the kind of company that invests in a guy like me to bring in is probably the kind of company who has built a decent culture because they care about their people. So I have some assignments where the people are more resistant than others. Some of my assignments have to do with long selling cycles, big. I'm dealing with a tier 3 automotive company now, selling to Volvo and Ford and these large companies. Well, the selling cycle is forever, takes forever. And that gets frustrating for me because it's like, man, I want stuff to happen, but it doesn't happen quick when you're selling to Volvo and you're speaking English and they're speaking Swedish or whatever. So that's probably the biggest challenge, is just the people and then the long selling cycle. I like complex sales. I think those are good, but anything more than a year, it becomes a little tough to keep people motivated and interested.
Yeah, I like your process a lot, and something that we do over here, because essentially what you're doing is you're asking permission to ask more questions, right? And the more questions that you ask, you can uncover a solution for them at that time.
Correct. And that's one thing, that's number 3 on my list of 5 here, is great sales professionals are good problem finders, then problem solvers. And I think we have been lulled into, in fact, I was telling somebody the other day, remember back in the 90s, you may not remember, where people on their business card had problem solvers. That was like the big thing. That was how to position yourself. Well, just tell them you're a problem solver. Okay, great, I will. And it's like, oh, everybody's saying that, number 1. Number 2, I want you to be a problem finder, because it's like the iceberg situation concept, where 10% of the problem the customer is aware of, 90% they're unaware of. Well, you can't just go into a prospect and say, what's your biggest problem? All they can tell you is what they're aware of. They don't know what's beneath the surface. And so you, as a professional, have to find a way to lower that waterline, expose some of the issues that they didn't even know they had. And that's an art, to be honest with you. You don't just do it by, we always say, you got to ask, 50 questions. Well, no, you don't have to ask 50 questions. You have to ask a few questions, but you have to concentrate on making them aware of some of the problems that they don't know they have. So problem finding first, problem solving second. Even before problem finding, you have to be curious. You have to care. Curiosity. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, tell us honestly, have you ever prospected a client that you're about to work for by having them subvert? Obviously, you wouldn't tell them, but go through one of their sales flows or try to prospect them and try to acquire and then poke holes into their systems?
Not without telling them I'm doing it. I mean, if somebody calls me and they want to have a conversation, we have a conversation, I might say, do you mind if I go through your sales process online to see what I can find out? And they usually say yes, but I don't do it up front, betting on the com. I could, but I just don't. After the first call, though, yeah, I will if it seems like it's something that's real.
Okay, cool.
So the other thing is, a lot of people we talk about confidence a lot. How do you have confidence? And I don't think confidence is a thing of life. I think confidence is very situational. Like, you guys are really good at podcasting. You do it like you're falling off a log now. If I give an assignment to start a podcast to somebody who's never done it before, they're not going to have the confidence to do it. And the problem is that it's really not internal. It's really a lack of clarity. I use the example that if somebody came to me and said, "Hey, Bill, I think I can get you on 50 podcasts next year, top 50 business podcasts on iTunes." And I say, "Okay, great. How to do it?" And they say, "Well, it's simple, Bill. Shoot a 2-minute video, send it to the host, and then follow up with an email a few days later, and you'll book a high percentage of those." I'm like, "Okay, that sounds good." And I say, "What is the chance I'm going to do that?" 0, because I'm not familiar with all the details of that. And by the way, I'm sure you get videos. I don't get too many videos. I get a lot of requests to be on the podcast, and they all have the same, you get it too, same pitch. It's like, God, can't you guys get creative? Anyway, but if somebody came to me and said, "Hey, I can get you on 50 podcasts," and I say, "Okay, how?" And they say, "Here's what you do. You shoot a 2-minute video. I'm going to send you the script for the video. I want you to set up the camera landscape. I want you to have good lighting. I want you to put it on Loom or Zoom or Dropbox. I want you to send the email to the podcast host. Here's what you say. I've got it all scripted out here for you." On and on they go. What do you think the chances of me trying it now? 100%. Why? Do I have more confidence? Yes, because I'm clearer. I have a clarity of the path is clear. A lot of times managers and owners, and if you have CEOs and people aren't getting the job done, it's probably because you have not been clear with them. You've told them, "Look, you need to generate $1 million, pal, next year or you're out." That's not clarity. That's just a threat. The question is how exactly are you teaching them how to do that? And sometimes I think we say, "Well, they're seasoned vets. They should know how to do it." No, they don't know how to do it. So I think there's a big lack of confidence that comes from just a general lack of clarity of exactly step by step how to do something. And that's going to lead to massive confidence.
Yeah, breaking the process down into small chunks and creating that framework and the outline, I think, is the key to having not just one great salesman, but having a repeatable process.
Yeah. I just gave a talk today, as I said, and one of the ladies in the room, they have to go back in and get more money from their clients because the salespeople misdiagnosed and misproposed. And so halfway through the project, these people have to go make the call. "Hey, look, we're going to have to upcharge you an extra 50 grand for this thing." And the customer gets all honked off, of course, because this comes out of nowhere. And so now they don't want to make the calls. So they put them off until finally they have to make the calls, and then they're desperate and needy. I said, "Let's walk through how to make that call." And we walked through step by step by step by step. Here's how you start it. Here's what you say. Here's your attitude in that call. She came up to me after the meeting and said, "I've been doing this for 10 years. And every time I get nervous when I have to make this call," she goes, I've got 5 calls to make. I'm going to make this call that you gave me this afternoon, and I'm going to call you back later this evening or email you and tell you how it went." She goes, "I feel so much different now because I have a path. I'm clear." So you owners and leaders, don't criticize your people for not doing the behavior if you haven't told them exactly how to do it.
Bill, in keeping with the upcoming holiday spirit, you were gracious enough to share with our audience your $1 million seller checklist. Tell us all, what is this $1 million checklist?
Yeah, I'd be glad to. And we can put it in the show notes. I'll get you a link so you can put it in there. Over the last couple of years, I've been working with a fair number of people who are high achievers in sales. They want to get to the $1 million income level. And I'm not suggesting that this checklist wouldn't be useful if you're doing 150,000 and want to get to 400,000. Same thing applies as exponential growth. But I put together this checklist. It has 15 items on it that if you look at these and you start to implement some of these and get on a path to implementation of these 15 strategies, and most of them cost nothing. This is not like you have to go buy farm in South Dakota or something. I mean, this is just really changing your mindset around sales and communication. And so it's a 4 or 5 page report, and we'll get it to you. We'll put it in the show notes and you can download that. It's been very helpful for people.
Awesome. Bill, thanks so much for being here. We want to be respectful of your time. So can you also tell everybody where they can get in touch with you? I know you're big on LinkedIn. Are there any other social channels as well?
Thank you. Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn. Probably the best place where you can get all that is go to Bill Caskey, CASKEY.com. And there's all sorts of my 2 podcasts that I do are there, links to them, and lots of free stuff. And then you can get access to that $1 Million Seller Checklist there as well if you choose. So
Awesome.
Thank you. Thank you, guys. I appreciate this. It's been a lot of fun.
Bill, one question before I let you run. You've worked with a lot of different companies, a lot of different industries. What's your favorite industry?
Favorite industry? I think any industry where there's a lot of knowledge that needs to be sold, like you're maybe accountant or consulting or strategic planners, where everything is what do we say? It's intangible. I like the intangible sale because I've got ways to help go from intangible to tangible, and I think it becomes a lot easier to sell knowledge if you can tangibilize it. That's my word, even though it's not forewent, it's tangibilize some of the product. So
I'm definitely stealing that one. Tangibilize. Oh man. So when I started out in sales, I was right out of high school. I worked on Wall Street, right?
No.
So we started selling, we sold stocks, right? And the first book that you had to read was The Art of Selling Intangibles.
Yep. By Beckwith. Selling the Invisible. Wasn't that it?
No,
or was it called Intangibles?
Art of Selling Intangibles.
Okay. Because there was one called Selling the Invisible.
Okay.
But same kind of concept, I imagine.
Yeah. I love that.
Yeah.
Bill, thanks.
When you were, one more thing real funny,
Yeah.
we're talking about the AI bot. I was thinking that, you remember 5 or 6 years ago when all of the automated answerers and the automated voice all became a lot more sensitive to you. Like if you'd call AT&T and they'd say, okay, please tell me your name. And you'd say, William Caskey. Oh, thank you so much. And it's like, well, you're trying to be a human. You're not a human. But that just reminded me of, come on, you can do better than that.
It's kind of, but they ask so many questions. It's kind of like, let's just get to the point. I don't have time for this. And you're speaking way too slow for me. I'm from New York.
You are. Yeah, I can tell. You're a quick guy. See you, boys.
Bill,
that was fun.
Bill, thank you so much. Thank you for being here.
Yeah,
appreciate you. Guys, that's a wrap of the Liquid Lunch Project. We'll see you in the next episode.
Thank you for listening to the show. And make sure you subscribe, leave a review, and share it with a friend. We'll see you on the next episode of the Liquid Lunch Project.